Okay, so today's topic, it's called the three brains and how to solve problems. So we're gonna, if you have any problems, bring them over and we'll try to fix them. And this is Infinite Man. Okay, you made it. Just a relaxed dude. Okay, so we'll see why he's here in a minute. We've been talking about the esoteric path, the internal path, and we've been talking about how this is a path of the revolution of the consciousness. This path is what they call in Buddhism the righteous path. The righteous path. It's the path of the person that tries to look for wisdom and tries to have an upright view and act according to the ethical principles of that we find in the universe that emanate from divinity. So these ethical principles, like generosity, like altruism, like compassion, are some of the qualities that sprout from within our being that allow us to be in harmony with others, allow us to have good relationships with others, with our environment, and with ourselves as well. So in this path, this is one of the aspects, another aspect of the path, which is to find balance between us, within us, to find the balance between what we think, what we feel, and what we do, so that we can follow along with our commitments and have, as we said before, a continuity of purpose. So since we've been studying ourselves and our psychology, and now we know that there is an individuality within us that it's called the consciousness. This consciousness is who we really are, and then as an opposing side, we find within our psychology also what we call the ego, which is a conditioning that's been put on the consciousness that makes it act in contrast to the being, to divinity, or to those ethical principles. So we find this conflict within us, and the conflict is generated by the ego, which is the one who eventually just generates all the problems in our life. And this is why we'll talk about how to solve problems. So we have three brains within our human machine. And these three brains are in the thinking center, the center of movement, and the emotional center. Okay, and they all are. We call them brains because they all think differently and act differently now because they are in balance. This is obviously the illustration of where they are, right? So again, the idea here is to start thinking, feeling, and acting in the same way. And one of the problems that we have in society is that people actually think one thing, but they feel something else, and then they end up doing something else, right? And that's why they can't follow on into their own commitments and commitments with others, right? We also have three types of personalities. Last time also we mentioned about the human machine, how we have those 5 centers: the intellectual center, the emotional center, and then the motor center, the instinctive center, and the sexual center. So the motor, instinctive, and sexual center all work as one in the movement center. The intellectual center acts independently, and the emotional center acts independently. So we have different types of personalities. We have those who are more of the intellectual type, those who understand life or try to understand life through the intellect, through theories, and then we have those who see life through the emotional center. Those are emotional people. The intellectual and the emotional can never communicate. You know, the intellectual always tells the emotional person to grow up, right, to become mature, those kinds of things. And the movement just says, forget about you guys. I'm just gonna go and do sports, and I'm just gonna try to experience life through the five senses, right? So we have those three types of personalities, and we have those within those as well. But there is one of those centers that we actually use the most. So all of us belong to one of these, or can identify more with one of those centers. So start to reflect on which one it is, right? Because ultimately they manage three different energies: the intellectual energy, the energies of movement, and then the emotional energies. So if we don't know how to balance these energies, we're going to unbalance ourselves, right? So then, this is why we need to learn how to balance these sectors. Now, education, the way that we've been educated has been mainly through the intellect, and ignoring that. The emotional center is, for the most part, ignored by education. We talk about acquiring knowledge, wisdom, and we know that it's important to exercise, right? But nobody seems to pay attention to the emotional aspect of life, and it's actually one of the most important aspects of life, if not the most important. And it's actually now science have been able to tap into the heart and the emotions, and now we come to realize that the heart itself is actually even more important than the brain. I have a small quote here from a guy named Po Chang. He wrote an article called "Scientific Evidence That the Heart is an Intelligent Electromagnetic Field Generator That Thinks." He says the heart gives us a universal characteristic, and the brain gives us an individualistic characteristic. So the heart and the emotional center is what allows us to unite and to bond with people and with others and with our environment. And it gives us that sense of universality, right? As opposed to the emotional, the intellectual center, that is the one that brings forth more of individuality. And it's interesting that in the culture that we have, we've been promoting individuality and along with selfishness, as opposed to the path of the heart, which is the path of the initiate, to follow the heart, right? Because in the heart we find those emotions that actually help us feel united with others. He says, for this reason, the heart holds the key to bonding with others, because the heart gives us universal characteristics and is the key to bonding. If we want to live in a world filled with peace and love, we need to listen and think more with our hearts instead of only our brains. Though through the hidden power of the heart, we can achieve universal understanding. Therefore, living in a world filled with peace and love is possible. Also, I'm going to send you guys a short, like 5-minute or 3-minute video about some facts about the heart. And one of them is very interesting. First of all, the heart is the first organ that starts to work in the fetus, and the brain comes after. Turns out also that the heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain to the heart. So it's almost as if the heart is actually telling the brain what to do. Also, the heart, or positive emotions, increase the brain's ability to make good decisions. And also, positive emotions can help creativity and innovative problem solving, which we'll talk about soon. But the positive emotions that obviously have their center in the emotional center, if we cultivate positive emotions, makes us more creative, makes us more motivated towards life, right? So throughout our education, we've missed this entire education of the emotional center, and now this is an invitation to start to start to explore our emotional center, and to balance it. Because as of now, we've been using more the intellectual center, right? And so the idea is to start using more of the emotional center to start balancing these two. So this is why put here, balancing of the center is very important. So we have, we need to find the correct balance between activity and repose of the centers. Okay. Also, these centers have a particular vital capital, or an energy that each center is given for the entire life that we have. So when we abuse any one of those centers, we start to lose the ability to use those centers. And this is what happens later on in life when, for example, we use our intellectual center too much. Then we have illnesses in the mind, like people that start to lose their short-term memory, and also people that just become crazy, and they end up in insane asylums because they've been using their intellectual mind, their intellectual energy too much, and they've abused it through mechanical imagination, which is just a total waste of energy. Instead of using our imagination in a conscious way, we let our mind just run and run with thoughts and thoughts, which not only uses up the energy of the center, but creates stress as well in our organism. This vital capitals is what it's called the bobbing candle knots, and this is a concept that you'll see. I'm not sure if you'll see in there, but Master Samuel talks about it. It's basically that each of those centers has a particular, it's like a particular capital, which we have to learn how to manage throughout our life. And then once we waste all those energies, then we begin to die. And we die, what's called dying by thirds. So we die first in the center that we use the most, and then later on we start to die in the other centers until we eventually pass away. If we, in the Eastern traditions, we find people that live 150, 200 years of age. And their key is that they say that they learn how to manage those energies. They learn how not to waste the energies and how to balance those centers. I read an article the other day of a guy in China somewhere that lived, according to the article, lives like 250 years. That is not the only article that I found. I found many other people that claim that have lived all these long years, but they seem to be more in the eastern part of the world, China and Tibet, all those parts, right? And Master Samal says that before, in ancient times, they used to learn how to educate people by teaching through those three centers. In Persia, in Greece, they used to teach knowledge through art also. So they used to combine not only the classroom and the theory, but they would expose their students to art, to plays, theater, all these things, so that through art we can be revealed certain mysteries about life. And this is why we actually watch movies and programs and these kinds of things, because it makes it fun, right? So it's always fun to learn when things are fun. So because you get the emotions involved. If you get the emotions involved, then you're actually more prone to act than if you just receive intellectual knowledge. Okay, so this is part of that balanced education of the centers that Master Samal suggests that we should teach our children in this balanced way, that not only intellectual knowledge, but also knowledge that comes from direct experience of whatever it is that we're doing, right? And also learn how to cultivate superior emotions within ourselves, not just inferior emotions that are mostly common, what we're familiar with for the most part. Um, and superior emotions are emotions of joy, happiness, those emotions that make you feel lighter, make you feel like in peace with everything at once, in that oneness with everything, right? And they, in general, they have this sense. They give you this sense of, um, of weightlessness, and they make you feel more light, as opposed to inferior emotions like anger, for instance, that makes you feel dense, right? And comes from the lower emotions comes from your solar plexus. Uh, Superior emotions come from the heart. Not all emotions and feelings come from the heart. We have to start to see the different types of emotions that go through our organic machine. Some emotions are felt in the heart, some emotions are felt in the stomach. Okay? For the most part, the organ that the thinking center uses is the brain. But the brain is not the mind, right? So that's something that we have to learn, or start to learn and to notice. The next class we'll talk about the three minds, and we'll actually get into what is the mind, and we'll go a little deeper into it. So the movement center has its center in the spinal column, and that's where all the nerves are connected to, parasympathetic, the sympathetic, which it's the one that allows us to move. And the emotional center doesn't have a particular place in the physical body, but it influences a lot the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, and also resides a lot in the heart. But it doesn't have a specific location in the human machine. So when we start to meditate, we learn how to balance these centers, and this is why meditation is like the basis of everything here, right? Through meditation, we learned how to relax the body, we learn how to relax the mind, and how to relax the emotions, right? Sometimes during the day, again, we use one center more than the other, and this is why at the end of the day we feel fatigue, right? And you can do a little experiment when you get home, or tomorrow after work when you get home. Since we use one center for the most part, that means that, let's say, if we use our movement center for the most part, because we're working physically, right, most of us, if we start using the energies of the motor center over these two, then these two energies become stagnated. So now we become tired because there's not a balance within us. So we're not moving these two energies. So sometimes, let's say, we use the intellectual center too much, and then we get home and we feel fatigued, but we're not quite physically tired, right? I don't know if you've been there. So that's because you've been using this center too much, and you haven't been ignoring for completely the emotional center. So one of the keys to actually give us a boost is to balance the centers. So let's say we've been using the intellectual center so much during the day, and when we get home, maybe go out for a walk and activate the emotional center, or listen to music, do some breathing exercises. Again, meditation, those things. So watch a comedy flick or something like that, and then you'll see how the energy will start to circulate again in your physical body, and you'll start to feel balance. You lose the fatigue. Most of the time, what we do is we tire, so we just go to bed and we're unconscious for 30 minutes or 2 hours or whatever, right? But sometimes if we just sit down and we meditate for 15 minutes, we become balanced, right? And that's one of the keys to find balance within ourselves after we've used up all of our energy in a particular center. So also, a good tool to use is self-observation and self-remembrance during the day. So during the day, we're going to try to observe our mind, or observe our emotion, and observe our physical body. Observe if there are any egos in those centers. Every ego has a particular desire and has something that he wants to do. Sometimes we have an ego in the intellectual center that wants to read a book, and then we have another ego in the emotional center, right, that wants to go watch TV. And then we have another ego in the motor center that wants to go and do sports. So we're like this, it's like a house with so many owners, but nobody's in control. So here's where the consciousness comes in, because we are the consciousness. But during the day, we lose our consciousness through all these different egos that come in, all these different desires. So the idea here is to start to activate your consciousness so that you can be in complete control of the energies of that go through your body. This way, you're not wasting more energy than you need, and you're conserving the energy. Also, we don't allow egos, for instance, in the mind, that simply want to be fantasizing the whole day about different things. You know, like you're working and you're fantasizing about how you're going to do the laundry 2 weeks from now or something, you know, which happens to us all the time. You're in the train thinking about what you just did, how you could have done that better, and what you're going to do tomorrow. So we're always living in the past or in the future, right? And we're never present. So all this projecting of thoughts is just wasting our precious energy. And then when we come home and we want to sit down to meditate, we have no energy. So then we just fall asleep. But hopefully you wake up after and then you meditate. Okay, so another aspect is mindfulness meditation. And mindfulness meditation is what we tried to do earlier. This is why I wanted to meditate before, which is to be mindful of yourself completely, right? To feel present, to feel the consciousness within you. Okay? The card said, I think, therefore I am. But he completely missed the emotional center and the consciousness, which is beyond the realm of thought. So I guess the correct way to say would be, I am, and later I exist. Because I am the consciousness. Later I think, later I feel, and then I act. Right? So the card was just stuck with the mind. He thought that he was just a thinking thing, what he says. But if there are thoughts, that means that someone's thinking those thoughts. So who is it? Is it the consciousness or is it the ego? It's one of the two. Okay? So the idea is to start connecting with the consciousness, so that we're the ones that are doing the thinking when we want to do the thinking and when we want to use the energy of the mind. Okay? So now let's get into problems. So what are problems? Problems are simply mental forms, either positive or negative. It is the mind trapped in duality of the opposites. So when we have a problem, our mind is usually, our intellect is usually trying to predict, but there are predictions based on fear, right? And this is why it's a problem. Because we're predicting things, and we have all these different options running around in our mind, and we can't find a solution to it. But for the most part, they are predictions based on fear, because they're based on the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that doesn't happen? What if whatever, right? So we're always in those. That the mind is always has that battle, and we have that battle because we have ignorance within us, because we ignore things, and this is where fear comes in, because we fear that which we don't know, right? So this whole process drains the intellectual energy. So we need to stop that. So how do we stop that? By deactivating the thinking center first. So here we look at how to dissolve problems. Not simply how to resolve problems, but how to dissolve them completely. Okay? And dissolving a problem is kind of like forgetting about the problem. Because for the most part, the mind is not gonna be able to get the answer to the problem. The answer should come with the consciousness. The consciousness is usually the one that intuits the answer. So I don't know if it ever happened. Most likely it happened to you, but sometimes you have this, you're wandering around, then eventually you stop thinking about it, and a day later, boom, you get the answer, right? Mm-hmm. Why? Because you have deactivated the thinking center, and now you have maybe activated the emotional center. You know, you're taking a shower or something, you're moving, you're not really thinking about the problem, and now the consciousness becomes active. And now it says, boom, oh, here it is, here's the answer. So the key to dissolving a problem is to deactivate the thinking center and activate the consciousness. And the way that we activate the consciousness is by having a passive mind and a passive personality. So when we have a passive personality and we're cool, we relax, and then the mind becomes receptive, right? Because for the most part, the mind is emitting thoughts. So when you're emitting thoughts, your mind is not open to receive any information, right? So the idea here is to have our minds open to what? To the truth that comes from the consciousness, okay? And we also like to, probably a good idea to eliminate that which causes the problems, which is the ego itself, right? And because ultimately the ego is the one that gets us into trouble, gets us into problems. You know, let's say we don't have money to pay the rent, that's a fact, right? But what caused that problem? Maybe the ego that spent the money on something else, or maybe the ego of laziness that doesn't want to go to work. Something like that, you know? So we also try to analyze the root of the problems and not just resolve the problem itself or dissolve it, but we also want to find the cause of that problem. Who was it within us that caused it? What ego, right? So then when we eliminate the egos, we eliminate the problems. Okay, so now we start to act with the consciousness, and we can relate better to others, we can relate better with our environment. And this takes on also another aspect, which is called mental hygiene. So mental hygiene is about being selective with the impressions that we receive throughout the day. So being selective of the environment that we want to be in, that it's going to trigger certain things within us. So if we're trying to be upright people, we're going to try to read books that show us how to act in an ethical way, etc. We're going to watch television programs that actually going to show us how to be better, and not just sit in front of the TV watching people killing each other for 2 hours just for fun, you know, because unconsciously those things within our actually become in our subconscious, and all that you see in TV and everything that you see around you, it's being picked up by the subconscious. And it's interesting that, for example, when you have a kid, that kid is not only learning through what he sees. His subconsciousness is picking things and making connections. So if you have, for example, a kid that is seeing people drinking, right, from an early stage, then they're going to relate fun times with drinking. But we come on and we tell them, no, you can't drink until you're 21. And then there's this conflict within them. It says, okay, well, if I can't drink and it's bad for you, then why do you do it, right? But it's this irony that the kid starts seeing, and then eventually he's just not going to care, right? But if we lead with example, and that's the point of this. The point is to find a balance within ourselves get rid of contradictions within ourselves and act accordingly, so that we can actually be examples of what it is to be an upright person. Because it's not just by standing here talking to you about how to be upright that that I'm gonna encourage you guys to start acting, right? You guys are gonna try to see my example, how I live my life, and also with others, just like you've seen the examples of your parents and so forth. So this is a fairly, I don't know, straightforward concept. And anybody has any questions up to here? No? Okay, class is done.
I had one, but I forgot it.
Huh? You haven't? We forgot it?
I had one when we were here.
Yeah, it'll come back when you take a shower.
Yeah,
When you deactivate your thinking, yeah.
So thinking center, movement center.
The movement center is in your spinal column. It's related to, because in the spinal column, that's where, if you break your spine, that's it. You can't, you lose movements.
And the emotional center is the heart.
The emotional center doesn't have a particular place. Yeah, it's, but you can feel the emotional center in the heart, and also in the nervous system. People that are unstable emotionally usually have a nervous system that it's unbalanced. Yes.
I now recall what I was going to
Okay.
ask. When you're saying, we during the day, depending on, what we work, what we do for a living, we use mostly movement center, which is my case. But I also use a lot of thinking center because while I'm working, I'm thinking about a lot of all the stuff, and then a lot of projects I'm working on.
Yeah.
Separate with, a lot of my day work. And the question was, using both those two. So that's why I'm so tired. And also, you mentioned something about, you fall asleep because you tired from, using movement center all day long or thinking center all day long. And that's the reason why sometimes you fall asleep even you sleep 8 hours straight. And you fall, you wake up in the morning like, tired.
You feel tired, yeah. Sometimes
Part of it.
sometimes you have like a heavy night because you've just been thinking a lot during the night. Your intellectual center has just been projecting dreams and dreams and dreams, and then you wake up and you feel like you haven't rested that much.
That doesn't have anything to do with the meditation, with the with the unbalance of the
So
during the day, or
it's an unbalance of the centers. Yeah, I think most of us use the intellectual center for the most part, most of the time. Sure, we move a lot, but even when we move a lot, I think that we use that on top of moving, we use the intellectual center more. So it's like, you already have these things going on, and on top of that, you're adding this distraction. That it's hard to explain, but when I started practicing being present, let me go back to an anecdote. My brother went to Tibet, not to Tibet, to Nepal, and he saw a lot of Buddhist monks, right? He had the idea that when he would go there, he was going to see a bunch of people meditating all over the place, right? So he started talking to the monks, and he said, he was in the monastery for a few days. He's like, I don't really see you guys meditate that much. I thought you guys were going to meditate for hours. And they told him, well, see, because you Westerns have a different idea of meditation. He said, for us, meditation is carried out throughout the day. So what they're doing is they're practicing meditation and they're balancing all three centers while they are doing whatever they're doing. So he was saying, we practice meditation when we're walking down the street, when we're washing our clothes. Because meditation is not just sitting down and doing the practice. It's lived up throughout the day. That's why during the day we're observing ourselves and self-remembering. So that when you're working, you're focused on what you're working, but your mind doesn't have to be there. Your consciousness is the one that has to be there, right? Or even if the consciousness is not there, at least not working and then thinking about a bunch of million things.
which I don't usually do.
Which is yeah. So then maybe that's why you feel physically tired and intellectually drained. You
I
know,
would say we abuse.
so we
basically
yeah
abusing the because in the thinking center plus the emotional center because it's not the conscious what is there. It's like movement and thought and
when
that's we get tired.
So I thought about that, what he saw in the monks in Tibet, and then I started noticing that when I started trying to self-observe and be in remembrance of the being, I noticed that we have this constant need to be entertained with something. We have lost the capacity to simply be, and so the mind is always looking for something to do. But we go through a stage where we lose that need to be entertained. And just being present and observant, it's enough for you to feel comfortable in the place that you are.
Like that's a form of balancing our thinking center. Like if you're just observing.
Right.
Because I'm thinking like how would I balance the thinking center?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like I can only think of like one thing or something or like so I guess
Right, just observe. It's basically to be observant. Because when you're observing, you're being receptive. But when you're looking at something, you might not be observing it. You're probably looking at Karen, for instance, but thinking about what I'm going to say next.
Something else.
Right? So there so that's why, self-observation, it's one key. The self-observation actually trains the mind to observe and to open itself, to be receptive, instead of just emitting thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. Which type are you, the intellectual?
yeah.
You're the intellectual one?
No. Me? Oh, because we have to think which one, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm the emotional one.
Oh, okay. It also kind of goes with your sign, with your astrological sign. It helps.
Yeah, I know people that they all they do is base it on I don't feel it right. It doesn't feel good to me. That's the emotional people. I mean, like they use more emotional center than the thinking center. You know what I mean?
Kind of.
Like,
Kind I
like
mean,
it doesn't. Like they go by the heart.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
think about
sometimes it
someone
feeds
first
the
that-
logic. Sometimes they're feeding the logic of whatever. You'll tell them that doesn't have any logic. No, but I feel that way. They go,
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So
Yeah, some people. Yeah, some
good person
people.
like that.
Some people go with what they feel, and even to you, it's so clear that they're gonna make a mistake, but they go out and do it.
I mean, sometimes they're right. Even if you think, when you use your thinking,
And
You-
and
oh, no,
sometimes
that's-
it's the opposite.
that add up, by your thinking, but they say no, it doesn't add up by the feeling, and they ended up, my own experience, ended up that they were right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The people that have a center of gravity in the emotional center are looking for the experience rather than just the theory. At least, that's the positive aspect of it. It's that you should learn through experience, not just through theory, because if you just know theory, you really don't know anything. It's the one that experiences life, the one that knows. That is why this is the path of the, like I said, the path of the heart. The one that actually tries to experience life. Okay.
So you gain wisdom.
Right.
What I've noticed about observing and thinking, because I think they tell you that a lot in yoga, observe, like stop thinking but start observing, is that when you think about something, you're bringing all those preconcepts that you have about it. So I'm looking at you, but I'm thinking about, or even about this, I'm thinking what I thought about it before, or
Right.
like I try to associate it with all the experience or whatever. When I'm observing, I just have a clear mind, and I just abstract whatever.
Right.
It's a big difference. It seems like the same if you don't think about it, but it makes a huge difference in life overall.
Yeah. Yeah. Next week we'll talk about the mind, and it's so crazy. The things that we it's crazy to study how the mind actually works. And sometimes we attribute things to the mind that has nothing to do with the mind, but let's say like with the instincts and with our subconscious. There is, for example, there's this study where they took men and they told them to look at pictures of women that they were all relatively, I don't know how they did this, but they had the same kind of beauty, right? Or they all kind of looked the same. So they asked them to choose which ones in the pictures, which ones from the pictures were more attractive to them. And in the pictures, they actually took the pupils of some of the women and opened the pupils a little bit, millimeters, and the men tended to be more attractive towards the women that actually had the dilated pupils. And the reason for that is because the dilated pupils, it's a sign of excitement and readiness in the female. And somehow, something within the men actually were able to catch that. But they weren't conscious of it. So it was their subconscious, the ones that was making the decision, right? It was the instinctive center, the instinctive sexual motor center, the one that was making the decision. So then, one of the questions is where's the consciousness there? Who was making the decision? So in other words, they were programmed to make those decisions through, they say natural evolution, through education, all these things. And I heard an example in Japan or in China where they put like Coca-Cola bottles, and somewhere in the label had more like a female body, and more people were drawn to that one than to the other type of soda. Just unconsciously, they were getting that more. So again, who's like, it just shows a little bit how programmed we are, and that we don't really use the consciousness, and so that we need to bring the consciousness into all these centers so that we can actually start to be conscious of what it is that we're doing, and eventually we get rid of problems. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit about those in the next class. So this class is the 3 brains, and we'll talk about the 3 minds next week. And then we'll talk about the universal mind. That one's pretty cool. Okay.
So you said you were gonna explain the symbol.
Oh,
It's 3 infinite.
no, it's just infinite, man. Just hanging out, just meditating, and this is just an example of about where the centers are. I just ended up with a blank space, and I said I had to draw something, so I just put it there.
I like his bow tie.
And he's got a bow tie. He's a classy guy. You can bring your shirt. You can bring your tuxedo shirt.
Looks like.
Oh yeah. And I put the I opened up a Facebook page, so it's over there, facebook.com/NYC Gnosis. Spread the word. Bring friends. Like the page. All right, cool.
Don't bring too much friends because we don't.
Oh yeah. Right.
That reminds us the next one and you
Yeah.
can join.
Very good. We did have about the other one.
It's still available. It's gonna be
The one in front of me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that
One for
one better.
myself.
Just like,
They will win.
Uh,
Really good, right? The 2 pounds.
Yeah.
That's it.
So how have you guys been doing with the meditations alone? Sarah, how are you? How is everything here? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
I'm still struggling a little bit.
with the meditation, you mean?
Yeah, like I don't know, I can't relax.
Okay.
the beginners like
So maybe start with the breathing. Okay. It's important to be able to do complete breaths. So I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but we usually breathe pretty shallow here, right? So what you want to do is try to have complete breaths so that your lungs take as much air as they can. And for that, you need to expand your diaphragm so that you're kind of breathing with your abdomen. Okay, so deep breathing or complete breathing has 3 steps. So first the air goes to the stomach, then it goes into the lungs, and then the upper chest. Okay, and then you exhale. Right? If you see a baby breathing, you'll see how it's like this. Don't worry about looking maybe your gut. It's just, the more air that you bring into the body, the more that you can relax. And also, I don't know, you sit, just try to find a position where your back is kind of falling back, but it's straight, and just relax. It's not creating any tension. Okay? You can put your hands like this or like this, right? Your feet also, they should be in a kind of a 90-degree angle. If you're meditating with heels and you're like this, and it's not very good. So you have your feet flat on the ground, or if you're comfortable doing the lotus position, you can do that, right? And just breathe in and out. So just start with that. Try to relax, and if you see any tension in any part of the body, and just try to release the tension there, and just focus on that. It's meditation. It's a discipline, and it takes practice and practice and practice. And in the beginning, what we're doing here is just simply trying to learn how to relax the physical body, which is the easy part, actually. So maybe if you get to that, you begin. The hard part is actually stopping the mind.
I love to talk about mind because I'm overthinking about 3 different things at a time.
Okay.
I love something to me, but
So
for me.
a practice that you can use to stop the mind is to give the mind something to do. Because that's why the mind usually it's wandering around because it doesn't have anything important to do, so it just starts. So then, focus, let's say, on your breathing while you're working. So you're walking down the street and you're trying to breathe consciously. And see how many times, not even counting this, if you see how many times you forget in one block, you probably lose count. Just the important thing is to just bring the mind back. You're walking, you're breathing, and then all of a sudden, oh, I lost. Then you come back. Then you remember to come back. Doesn't matter how many times you leave us, what matters is how many times you come back. Because then the mind starts to train itself to come back, to come back, to come back. And avoid trying to do many things at the same time. A common thing nowadays is to walk and text at the same time, which is not only dangerous, but you can't imagine how much energy you're wasting there. And you're doing the opposite of what you're trying to do here, which is to train your mind. Because when you're doing this, you understand how much work is going in your instinctive center, in your motor center, to try to keep you balanced so that you don't run into walls, And you're just welcome back. So one practice is to simply just try to be focused on what you're doing and not give yourself extra things to do. So if you're walking, just walk. And it's just, now it's boring to walk. People can't just walk anymore, just kind of enjoy,
Yeah.
Try to find something new.
Yeah, but the thing, I think we gotta start to realize that, or the thing that we tend to think, at the same time you're doing something else, is not as important. Because let's say, you have things, other things, running or whatever. So then I gotta call this client, I gotta do this, I gotta order this material, I didn't do this yesterday at the building.
I give my mom some tips because sometimes you have to organize the mind. The mind likes to be organized.
Yeah.
So if you have a lot of things to do, take a piece of paper and write it down. Say, I have to do this, I have to do this, and I have to do that. Because the problem is that the mind knows that it has to do many things, but it hasn't planned it yet. So then when you're going out the day, the mind's like, I still haven't done this, I still haven't done that, I still haven't done that. I gotta figure out how I'm gonna do this, I gotta figure out how I'm gonna do this. So just take 5 minutes of your day and say, okay, today I have to do this, and I'm gonna do it this way. I have to do this, and I'm gonna do it this way.
I need to work.
When you leave, you're probably gonna be more, because your mind is at ease. Your mind says, all right, I already figured that out, so I don't have to think about it anymore. Now I gotta think about something else.
Mhm.
That's fine. Who's on that?
Let's see, let's check out Facebook. But yeah, when you know in the morning when you walk to your car, try to find something new in the street. Every time that I walk, I try to find out something new. So I'm always observing, like, and every time I find something, every time that I'm really doing it,
Mhm.
I find like a window that I never saw before in this house. At the beginning, there were even houses that I never even noticed, and then I said like, oh, that's interesting, new house, you know. So try to see the new and everywhere that you go. The brain works with assumptions and predictions. So basically, the brain rejects about 99% of what it's around it, and just makes decision based on predictions, because the brain thinks that he already know what's here, so the brain just goes and you go mechanically. But it's not until something out of the ordinary happens that then you pay attention and you focus and you observe. So we have to kind of call ourselves to the attention all the time. This is the whole thing about like pinching yourself. Like, am I dreaming? Am I here? Yeah.
It's probably why we don't remember things. Like say we hear and then what color was it? The house. I don't know. I
Right.
don't remember.
Observe.
Yeah. People before used to have more memory. There's another thing about how the internet is shaping our memory. Is that now we don't even remember things anymore because we know, for instance, that you can just Google something and it'll be there.
See.
Or you have it in your phone. You have it in here and there. Huh?
Smarter phones on their people.
Smartphones on people.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, there's this this study that says that if we brought someone from ancient times, like a Greek from ancient times to here, he would be way smarter than everyone in the room. Because he would actually know how to do things. And he would be able to use his memory faster than you, and all these kinds of things. So he would actually be smarter, as opposed to what we think that they were dumber back then. But all the knowledge that they had it in here, and they were able to access that knowledge. But now we have our memory in the phone. So now you don't need to remember anything. Now you don't even need to remember the phone numbers.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about now. I can't remember one of the first phone number we had at home, but
I still remember mine from like 20 years ago.
Yeah. That one. Because now you don't even know the
It's like-
wonder.
That's
Yeah.
all the time.
And even if I forget it, I'll have to do this. Like, I know this.
Yeah, like,
It's
yeah,
still there. It's in the movement brain, or the instinctive brain. Yeah.
Amazing.
Then, so we'll talk about the mind for the next two classes, our own mind, and then the universal mind, and then we'll talk about. We'll start to talk and focus on the consciousness, how to activate the consciousness, the qualities of the consciousness, and how to be present. That's why I want to throw you guys this two keys of self-observation and self-remember. So self-observation is to observe what's happening, and to self-remember is to remember yourself as a consciousness. Because a lot of the times we can self-observe, but do that only with the intellect, but not with the consciousness, right? So try not to think about it too much. Just do it.
A headache already.
What's your sign?
Capricorn.
Capricorn. I think that's Earth, an Earth sign. Do you know? I wish your mom was here. She like. I think Capricorn is an Earth sign.
Google it.
I'm pretty sure of it. Yeah, it's an Earth sign. It's an Earth sign, and Earth Earth signs they use the intellect a lot too, because they like explanations. They like planning things, reasoning, those kind of things. I know because my Caesar's girlfriend, my brother's girlfriend, is Capricorn.
Mm.
She likes details,
Sí, sí.
and planning and all. She's got a planner. I always make fun of her because she has a planner. It's like, you got a planner? Let's do something. Let me check my planner. What about you?
One.
No, what center do you? I don't know.
The
I
more.
think 2 and 3. But more 2.
2 and 3, the movement and the
Emotional.
emotion.
I don't think it's emotional.
I don't think you're emotional.
At all. If anything, that's a list.
I think you're more of the.
Mira cómo que hace.
I make him cry because of the instincts.
No, don't confuse the instincts with the emotions. No.
Okay.
Don't confuse
So-
sensations with emotions.
so
It's different.
Some movement.
Emotions, feelings, and sensations are different. They're all different.
I'm sincere.
Yes. Haven't seen that
That's a
part
good
yet. Oh.
What is that?
What about you, buddy?
Probably 1 and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
1 and 3.
What is that, for instance? I mean, that just happened today. I received a bad news, right? Something, you know. Basically, it's bad. Oh, maybe it's not as bad, but I related with the other bad experience that I had in business.
Yeah.
So then I kind of like shocked me, right? And then I was, you know, kind of thinking about it and doing something else. I was on the phone with somebody, you know, with a business partner, you know, talking about something else. And I realized that then I have a sharp pain on my chest. And then I know that when you know, when I've been going through, you know, bad news or stuff, you know, I have a bad, you know, like a sharp
Right.
bad pain on my
Right.
chest. I couldn't even kind of breathe for a second, and you know, did that have something to do with all this?
Yeah. Well, you know, thoughts. The mind generates illnesses in the physical body. Stress generate illnesses. So, because, see, again, the mind is the one that makes the problem. All we're confronted during daily life is just facts. Just facts. And then the mind comes in with a concept and says it's either good or bad. And that's the duality that I was talking about. So we have to realize that, especially the things that we have no control over, we shouldn't get upset.
Yeah, that helped me out. I think I don't have the pain anymore.
Okay.
I came back up to that and said, you know what? I don't have control over it, so
Yeah.
just forget about it.
If you have no control over it, then why worry? You know, who's the one that worries? The one that worries
Yes.
is a particular ego that likes the sensation of being worried, right? Or being preoccupied with things. It's one of the aspects of the personality also, to fear, to be preoccupied with things. So we'd say don't be preoccupied, just occupy yourself with things, so that then everything goes smoothly, you know. Of course, but you know, not everything is within the reach of your hands. You know, there are things unexpected that are always going to happen in your life, and this is why we see life as a psychological gymnasium, where we're here to learn about ourselves. And if you want to learn about yourself, you have to be given circumstances that are going to allow you to see your psychology, right? So, one of the symptoms of awakening, they say, it's that you start to suffer a little bit. That's because before you didn't suffer too much because you lived in this illusion, right? And you didn't see the world as it really is. You didn't really see yourself. But now you start to see the reality within you, and it shocks you and it hurts you a little bit. Then you go over that. But yeah, just it's stopping the mind when the thoughts come in. So when the thought comes in, and you catch yourself saying, "Oh, what if this?" and just forget it. Forget it. It's fear acting. It's fear, and it's a particular sensation that a part of you actually enjoys. Research has been done, and some research suggests that people that fall into depression, one of the reasons why it's hard to get people off depression is because they start to enjoy the feeling of depression. They start to enjoy the sensation of the feelings that depression brings forth. You know, that's like their new reality. It's this sensation. Just like you go for a sensation when you go on a roller coaster, right? You also have a particular sensation when you're depressed. You start to enjoy that sensation. So you become attached to that sensation. So it's about then contrasting sensations that come from the consciousness, sensations of happiness and joy and tranquility that are way better than being angry or depressed or, you know. So, but of course you have to experience that light first. Maybe for you, you can't just not be depressed. You have to experience the opposite of depression, which is happiness, right? So that then you have something to tag on to.
So like the three brains, right? The three centers. Like if you wanna like exercise the centers, like if you wanna exercise the thinking center, you can read or play chess or whatever, right? Your movement center, you can do sports.
Right.
But then your emotional center, how will you exercise?
All right. There are superior types of art. Art. You can also exercise your emotional center when you read, depending on what you read. If you read things that are when you read, you have to concentrate, and the mere act of concentrating is activating the consciousness, and it's balancing the centers, right? So the key really is to activate the consciousness. Once the consciousness is active, then the centers start to become balanced, right? So when you have one center that's working more than the other, then you want to switch it. You want to use the emotional center. We don't really use the emotional center that much, and when we do, we use it for negative emotions or inferior emotions, because there are some positive emotions that are inferior also. But that's
Yeah, like when we are like emotional and then sometimes you feel like, and then you watch a movie like romantic, like sad, and then you ended up crying.
yeah.
So
Like that's
you're not doing
sentimentalism.
any, yeah, like then
So like sentimentalism,
different.
it's different than for instance, I don't know. People tend to think that if you're crying for everything, you're mature because you know you can manage. You're not afraid to let your emotions out in the open and stuff like that. And it's some people think that it's very mature.
No, but I think
But
that I heard friends
it's-
like you say, oh, I like this book and this kind of movie, but because it made me cry and I like that. So, but why if it make you cry? I don't think it make you happy. It make you more, you feel more depressed or emotional, or what you said.
yeah,
know,
sentimentalism is
sentimental,
very
like-
interesting because most people tend to now lean on that, and that's why people like to see videos that make them cry all the time. And then they post it on Facebook, so they're proud that they're crying. And people see that
Exactly, like,
people see that they're sensitive. It's like, okay. But it's just the emotional center. It's just the negative aspect of the emotional center.
yeah, we
Then
don't
you have
put
feelings of
entertainment.
joy and happiness and peace and serenity, which are completely different. Which is a balanced way. It's not draining your energy. On the contrary, when you experience those emotions, you feel like you're recharged, like you're full of vitality. And when you have the inferior emotions, you feel like you actually lose energy and like it's draining you. So when you're watching a soap opera, it's like it's draining your emotion. It's draining your energy from your emotional center.
The news channels at night. I don't like
Yeah.
to watch
Oh,
the
yeah.
news.
yes,
I feel that right away just makes me feel so sick and just.
And then you go to sleep.
And then I
It's the
can't
worst.
sleep.
No, and then you
Yeah.
can't sleep. Exactly.
have to watch
You
it.
go to bed,
So I don't
but
even
thinking
watch.
you dream with that, and
It's
it's.
always bad news.
You get a beer, man.
That's a wine, right?
That's it. That emotion is beer.
You have to be able to
There's
watch
the
it.
instinctive man talking.
No, but I like having like I don't know.
Some beer.
No, like some wine
Yeah.
or beer. Just it helps me get relaxed.
Good shot.
I know it's not like
No,
I
red
try
wine
not
is
to
pretty
abuse
good for
it, but
health.
like a little bit.
Yeah, that's the point. You don't wanna abuse it. You don't wanna abuse it.
Like Sally, you don't want.
Well, the point is that you don't want to abuse things and you don't want to become dependent on them.
Dependent on
And
that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, I I don't usually drink anymore because now I
You
meditate
don't need it.
and I don't need it, But occasionally I have a beer or two, If I'm out with in a particular group and I just feel like I want to have a beer, I have a beer. What's
Just
the
one.
problem, The problem is when you're attached to it, When you're out, with the family having dinner and there's a bottle of wine, everybody's having wine, you make a toast, you drink, you enjoy it, But then if you, it is different to enjoy a glass of wine and then, enjoying 5 or 10, because then you lose your consciousness. So, I know that if I have about 3 beers, I start to lose my consciousness. So I just have 1 or 2. And that's it,
I have one.
And
Because I
My
have two,
God,
I
you-
lost my
well,
Sometimes half.
and
And
you just without
Unas dos así.
Eso era para la sed nomás.
oh man, I'm still recording.
You can't edit that. It's fine.
Drink responsibly.
Not a problem.
Sorry, I can edit.
Ay, qué risa.
Oh man.
No, y que se vuelve un hábito, por ejemplo, de la cerveza. Por ejemplo, un vino. Ok. Te lo digo por experiencia. Sábado me ponía a limpiar. Estoy hablando en español, bueno, estamos en español. Me ponía a limpiar los sábados, un vinito. Ya. El próximo viernes, si no hacía eso, ya como que extrañaba. Decía, no, pero ¿qué pasó aquí? Entonces, me fui viendo la costumbre de que todos los sábados o los viernes me ponía a limpiar y me dormía a la 1, 2 de la mañana cuando era tu vecina, así. Entonces, cuando no tenía como que el vinito, como que no me motivaba a limpiar. De pronto tú dices, no, ya, ¿qué es esto? ¿Me entiendes? Tú es como que ya, entonces cuando estás en esto, que ya tienes que aprender, dices, de verdad te pones a pensar y dices, pero ¿quién quiere eso? ¿Yo? El yo, o sea,
¿Cuál yo?
no definitivamente.
¿Cuál
Entonces tú cortas con eso y te pasa. ¿Entiendes? Como, y uno va analizando.
So, who actually wants a photocopy of the lecture? Because I know some of you liked for me to print it out, and some of you can
Yo
take
no
this
la
one.
puedo ni
That's today.
La de la semana
I'll
pasada.
take one
Do
today.
you want one? Have one over there.
Ah, pero esta es vieja.
I have one more.
Ah, la de la
Going
pasada.
once, going twice. Sold to Bob Stewart.
Esta fue de last week, ¿eh?
That was from last week, yeah.
Dale tú.
Oh yeah, take this one.
Que
This
te
is like a
pongas a
complimentary
Lorena.
to that.
Te pongas en...
After
Si alguien quiere un
when you think
tecito,
free
you
now.
wanna drink a tea or
Bananas.
whatever.
Banana.
Tell a joke.